Yes, let's do a deep dive into the most bizarre arcade game that was never ported to any home console system. And I'm talking about the legendary Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder. It's bizarre to me that it was never ported to anything at all, it being one of the best arcade games I've ever played, best multiplayer one at the time, but we're gonna get into that. But coming from a known franchise, a known name like Golden Axe, and coming from a known company like Sega, and it was never on anything. It wasn't on 32X, it wasn't on Sega Saturn, it wasn't on Dreamcast, it wasn't even on any of those Sega's greatest hits that came out for PlayStation and Xbox, and it completely befuddles me of why that is. This game is really, really amazing. Now, it is one of those arcade cabinets that's the wide version that's 4 players at the same time, sort of like The Simpsons and whatever the other one was, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, only those ones were kind of like quarter munchers. This one came out later on in the arcade's lifespan when people were more playing games at home a little bit more and less into the arcades. They were on their way out. So what Sega decided to do was when they made this sequel, they made it actually fair. It's one of the most balanced arcade games. It's challenging, yes, but you can still end this game with 1 quarter put into it. Now, of course, there is Golden Axe 1, 2, and 3 for Sega Genesis, and there's a couple of spin-offs. I think there's a spin-off fighting game for it as well. But the point is that this was a direct sequel to the actual arcade original one. So it's hard to explain. It's sort of like The Empire Strikes Back for Star Wars. That's why it's called The Revenge of Death Adder, where it's sort of like the bad guys have a little bit more of the advantage in this one. And it's basically in the Golden Axe world, so to speak, but it's changed. So the characters are all different. Now, I always thought that the barbarian character was the same as the original first one, but apparently, according to Wikipedia, he's not. He's a different barbarian, and all the other characters are different as well. The dwarf is still in it, but he is just piggybacking on the back of this giant, and the giant is actually using the dwarf's axe, right? So there's that, and then there is also a centaur type woman character in the game. I didn't really like that character that much. I would have liked to see more of like the Amazon warrior woman from the original one, or maybe her daughter or something like that, because this is in the future. And then there's my favorite character that I love playing the most, and he's like a little elf with the goat legs. Can't remember what they're called. They have the flutes and stuff like that. They're fawns or something like that. I can't remember what they're called, but I always love playing him. The characters are all different on how they attack and how they move, and he was the quickest. He was the most agile, didn't deliver the most damage, but he had the fastest attacks. But everybody has a magical ability, magical spell, just like in the original one, that would damage everybody on the screen except for him. This is why he's my favorite, and this is so perfect that Sega put this in the game, this little change, because what he would do is he wouldn't cause any damage with his magic. No, he would heal all of your friends and all of your party members who are also playing the game. What he does is with his magic, he summons these like little apple trees that grow out of the ground, and depending on how many characters are playing them in the game, that's how many apples will drop. Now, it's great because I would always keep an eye on everybody's life bar, and I'd be just like, oh, heal time, and then I would just push it, and everyone would get healed at the perfect moment. Like, everyone always loved playing with me because they knew how good I was with when anyone needed to be healed to keep everybody alive, and they would always make sure that I always got the potions. No one would be greedy and just start grabbing them. They'd always make sure that they're like, has Ed got his potions? Okay, he's got his potions, then we can always be healed, right? Which is cool and sometimes I would get greedy though, because when I would summon the apple trees, I would steal everybody's apples. Oh, the game is so good. Now, maybe another fun fact that you didn't know, and this is again with the original one, is that the death cries in the game are actually taken from real movies at the time, namely, and I'll name them both right here. One is Rambo First Blood, the First Blood Part 1 with Sylvester Stallone, and the other one is Conan the Destroyer, which was the sequel to Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I will play you the death cries back to back from the movie and the game right now. Now, another fun fact too is that, spoiler alert, okay, at the end of the game, when Death Adder's defeated and falls off the dragon, and you can see him way in the background falling to his death in front of the mountain, he does the same death cry as the guy falling out of the helicopter all the way to the ground to his death from Rambo First Blood Part 1. Now, in the original one, you could ride these dragons, which gave you sort of an advantage in terms of a little bit of range and a little bit more power that would deal a little bit more damage to the enemies. But in this one, that's what I love about this sequel. It's one of the greatest ones of all time because it's just everything the original was so great, but just blown up and just added up to 11. So instead of these dragons, they've got these giant insects in the game now. So you can ride on these giant praying mantises and giant scorpions and such, and they would have two different types. Like there'd be one that could breathe fire, and then the other praying mantis would attack quickly with his claws, and the exact same thing with the scorpion, except he would have a giant electric zapping lightning tail. I mean, who thinks of this stuff? It's so imaginative. I love it. And then there's some undead dragons that, get this, they actually spit exploding grenade fireballs that just go kaboom on the ground and just blow up anything that gets into the way of the explosion of them, and it's extremely satisfying, I gotta be honest with you. Another thing too is the bosses. I love how they added the actual boss's life bar, this big long life bar on the bottom of the screen, basically a beginner's version. Like it predates even Dark Souls started doing that, and other games started doing that. So I love that. Another great thing about the game that you may not know, and we always did it at the same time, is if you were playing with your friends and your family, whoever, and you were playing together, if you were beating up on a boss, sometimes the bosses would drop down to one knee and sort of like have their poise broken, sort of like in Elden Ring. And if they were down on their one knee, and then all of you ganged up on them and just started attacking them all at the same time, you could pick them up in the air and literally do like a spinning Zangief pile driver on that would just deal an exorbitant amount of damage to the bosses. And we'd always know how to do it. Like, we had the game down to a science on it, okay, just from experience and just playing it over and over again, because it is a game that's about memory and it has great replay value. And I'm gonna segue into my next thing about that, is there are different paths that you can choose in the game as well. The original one, you couldn't, you just went one way, it was just one level after the other, right? In this one, you would get to the end and it would actually ask you, do you want to go up through the town area, or do you want to go into the giant mushroom forest of death, or the swamp, or do you want to go through the graveyard, or do you want to go here, do you want to go there? You had all different ways to go in the game. It is great. The graphics are amazing in the game as well. Again, ramped up to 11. I love all the sprites in the game. There's also cool cutscenes. If you have a lot of magic and you're basically going to destroy all the enemies on the screen, it shows an actual cutscene of a close-up of the enemies and their faces getting completely melted off by the flames, or they're getting completely petrified and turned to stone. It's totally rad. The music is amazing in the game, even better than the original one. They've got all this Conan the Barbarian sword and sorcery, boom, 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 great music being played all the time that just completely ramps you up and makes you want to play the game even more. There's also these cool weapons that you can get for your mounts as well that was not in the original one. So you can get these catapults that fire these flaming, like, fireballs out of them, and you can get the spear launcher, an arrow launcher. There is so much content to this game, and this is all off the top of my head. I'm just trying to think of it because I've played it so many times. I could plug my money in and play, and as I'm playing, I guarantee you someone is just gonna come along and they're just gonna, like, oh, they're not even gonna ask you, they're just gonna join in, or they're gonna be like, oh, hey dude, can I join in? And be like, yeah man, go for it. You know, like, why would you say no? The more the merrier, right? It was fantastic. You know, there's these voodoo guys in the game. There's the story is very loose with it. I like to think that they're like these shaman voodoo guys in the game that brought Death Adder like back to life or something like that. They resurrected him, and they're all throughout the game. You've got those little magical dwarves running around. You hit them, you get the potions. There's also areas where you can interact with the backgrounds and such. You can open up these jail cells, and maybe some potions might pop out, or maybe some, I don't know, some skeletons might pop out out of nowhere. There's so much to this game, and then you make it to the end, and you have to fight Death Adder, and he has multiple forms. It's amazing. I love his castle too in the background. There's a whole mountaintop that's been carved out of the shape of Death Adder just to like worship him some more. And then you have to fly around on this dragon to all the different parts of his body, and every single time you hit a boss, it blows off a part of the mountain eventually, and then eventually blows his head up, and then the final confrontation with Death Adder begins at the end. It is great. It is fantastic. Yeah, Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder. I think I've covered everything about it. I love it. It's a total shame that we never ever get to play it. If you actually own that arcade, I doubt anybody who watches my channel actually owns that arcade. It's that rare. But if you do, I am so envious of you. If I could pick one arcade, if you could pick one arcade, type it in the comments down below, or even type in the comments down below, what is the best sequel game that you've ever played? Because this is definitely high on my list as maybe even number one, aside from maybe Symphony of the Night. I'm talking about, there was part 1 and then there was part 2, and part 2 was just so much better than part 1, but still retained the essence of what made the original one so great. So that's it, guys. Thanks a lot again for watching. Give me those thumbs up, and if you want to see me talk about another retro game, you know where to click over there. And if you're new to the channel, thank you. And if you want to subscribe, click the bubble over there. And I'll see you guys in the next one.